class, I never teach. I never do warm-ups. I've never done warm-ups.
Mm-hmm.
I always do, like, I remember when I'd come to class, um, a lot of times we had like hour and a half class. And for the
Yeah.
first half an hour, we did warm-ups, like different push-ups or different sit-ups, running around. So I never came to that. I skipped that all the time. I couldn't stand that. I was like, I'm not here to do, I'm not here to do running around, sit-ups and push-ups. I want to do jujitsu.
Jiu-jitsu,
So,
yeah.
so what I do now when I teach my class, I never do those type of warm-ups. I do warm-ups, but not those type. What I do is I do the warm-ups are the techniques from the previous class.
Oh, the
That's
techniques from the previous class. Okay.
that's the warm-up. You start slow motion, just slow motion drill the moves from the last class,
Mm-hmm.
and then slowly, I add more to it, and then you can do it slowly, and then faster and faster and faster. But the warm-up are actually functional because they're actually the techniques from the previous class. So that's, I think that's as functional as it gets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Brilliant, brilliant. I'll try that.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice, 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 nice. So
You just want to do it slowly. You want to start off drilling it like slow motion. Imagine you're playing a movie in slow motion. You drill the
mhm.
technique in slow motion. Focus on the each step. You know, so you do step by step, and then
Mhm.
once you got every step correct, you start connecting those steps, and you start doing it more seamless, and then you start doing it a little faster and a little faster. But you don't want to be sloppy with the drills. Also, a lot of people, they drill like empty-minded. I think, you know, you want to be completely like, how do you call it, mindful when you drill. Meaning the whole point of drilling is to drill the techniques that eventually they become part of your arsenal, right? So you develop, I mean, they eventually become part of your DNA. I would say, you know, that
Oh yeah.
you develop muscle memory. So that's the whole point. It's not just empty drilling. You want to drill them slowly and be mindful of each step, and then slowly, eventually, if you're able to, you start connecting those dots, those steps, and make it seamless. But start slow first. Like a lot of students, they do everything too fast, and it becomes sloppy, and the technique is not correct. So you want to have the correct details, slowly but surely connect those first step by step, then connect them, and then be mindful when you drill. So it's better to drill, you know, like for what I'm saying is like, let's say you do the technique 10 times, but you're really
Mhm.
mindful. That's better than doing the technique 100 times without thinking about it, you know, just
Mhm.
repetition. So, and then also another important thing is, you know, I've seen so many times where people, students, you know, I can tell them to do shrimping all the time, shrimping left and right, and they're really good at it. But then when they roll, they don't shrimp at all. Very common, very common like that. So you want to be mindful to actually use these techniques that you learn and in sparring. So you have to write these things down. If not, you forget. You won't do it. You know, what's the point to drill if you don't even try it out in free sparring? So of course,
Yeah.
obviously, the isolation sparring is important,
Ah yeah.
but that's where the student is, you know, limited to the techniques that we just learned. But then that also doesn't mean that they're going to use it in free sparring. So you want to make
Mhm.
sure you practice the moves in free sparring. And obviously, because you're not proficient at the move yet, you only want to try these moves on against somebody much less experienced first.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see it. And yeah, how to drill these things. Don't drill it slowly. Start with the slow motion drill. Eventually, once you get really good at each step, you can do it faster and faster, and eventually you do it very fast. Yeah, for example, you learn a reversal, a butterfly guard reversal. Okay,
Ah.
so then from the seated guard, let's say, okay, you break it down in steps first. You butt scoot forward to the side, and you get an
Yeah.
underhook, let's say, and then another step is you grab the guy's arm so he can't post, and then you fall to your shoulder, and then
Yeah.
you kick your butterfly hook up, and then the other leg posts off the mat, pushes off the floor, and then you sweep them, and then you connect. You stay connected. You want to stay always connected, and then get on top, and you end up in, let's say, mount, and you break those steps down, like 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 a step by step first. Then once you feel you got each step correct, you can start now connecting those steps. But now you're doing it seamless, meaning you're connecting those dots, you're connecting
Yeah.
those steps, and making it one move. And then eventually, once you feel you got that correct, you can start doing it a little faster, and then a little faster, and then a little faster, and then faster and faster and faster and faster. But what I'm saying, a lot of students, they just do it fast from the get-go, so they don't get it correct. So I always tell my students to drill things slow motion first. It's very difficult for people to do that because they want to do everything fast. So that's also another important thing, is to be mindful of drilling and to drill it slow first, to make sure you get every detail correctly. I think it's all in the details, like a lot of the things are missed in translation, just the details. For example, Hickson calls it invisible jiu-jitsu, and there's a lot of things to
Mm-hmm.
do with that, where you can't see it, but you can feel it, and it's a lot to do with where you put your weight at the given moment in time.
Yeah.
Your body part. What body part is aligned to what body part of your partner, and
Mm-hmm.
when and where you put that, you distribute your weight into it. But then, of course, not too much, just enough that you achieve your goal. Um, and then also using skeletal structures, using your hands and your elbows and your feet and your knees and your forehead, meaning your spine, as frames and hooks, combining frames and hooks, and aligning these skeletal structures in a perpendicular angle that you can carry the most load, so you become very efficient. That's also a lot to do with connection, frames, and hooks to maintain position. And then from there, you can start capitalizing on your partner's mistakes. And the ultimate goal in this is to use your partner's energy against them. So for every
Yeah.
action, there's a reaction. If they pull back hard, I push with correct timing. If I push and they
Use
push
it.
back hard, I pull or I deflect the energy. So I think the end goal, that's the end goal. That's like to be able to make it so effortless to defeat your attacker using their own energy against them. And that takes a lot of time and practice. It doesn't happen overnight. It sounds at first very cliche, but eventually it starts clicking when you do it correctly, when you learn it correctly. So it's also important to have
Mm-hmm.
a proper guidelines on how to learn things, because you can have two groups of people. They have the same exact techniques that they're learning, but their training method is different, and the outcome is very different. That's why, like, isolation, we do a lot of isolation, different isolation. It could be positional, it could be position with submission, it could be just submission. Like, for example, we'll sometimes, let's say when we did the armbar, we start from the armbar. The isolation sparring was starting from the armbar. Or when we did triangle, we were starting from the triangle. Or when we do leg locks, we start from the leg locks. Or when we did crucifix, from the crucifix. So I think free sparring it's not often the best thing, especially for a beginner. So, because you need to, like, limit what they can do to micro. You got to micro in certain situations. Mount, back mount, side control, half guard, and limit that, and so they can learn the techniques that were taught. And eventually it's like a puzzle. You're working on different puzzles, and then eventually you can put it together, and that's when you go free sparring. So with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of students, and I get a lot of my students that are they really like they have a love and hate relationship with the isolation sparring, but they realize that the isolation sparring, the specific sparring, really helps their game, to improve their game. But
I'm into
doing
positional
the
sparring.
what's that?
I love positional. I love positional sparring.
Yeah,
It
it's so
helps me a lot.
important.
Helps me a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, it's really important to do. Um, and it's very effective to do that. Whereas free sparring is good. It is really good if you use the free sparring to isolate certain techniques that you want to do, and that's what I do when I do free sparring. Like I was saying, you actually isolate and work on what you want to work on. Don't play your A game. Play whatever you need to work on, what you want to develop in a new different submission that you never do, a different guard pass, a different whatever, different reversal, different transitions you never do. You want to work on that. And a lot of people, they think quantity. They think, okay, like, they want to have more techniques, but often it's not the techniques. It's the fundamentals. It's the basics. It's
Fundamentals.
your hips. Your hips are really important.
Yeah.
Bridging, the shrimping, the weight distribution, your framing,
Connection.
all these things. Yeah, the connection. That's such an important thing to work on. Whereas a lot of people want quantity. They're like, okay, what I know, I'm a blue belt now. What other techniques do I need to know to get my purple belt? And once you get your
Nothing.
purple belt,
Nothing.
what techniques to do to get your, brown belt? And that's not what it's about. It's about working the fundamentals
Basics.
first. Having deep fundamental. Like having deep roots, like strong fundamentals. And I think that's what I credit Hickson for, that I developed strong fundamentals, positional, as well, through what I learned from Hickson. And my analogy is, for example, if techniques were words, vocabulary. A lot of people, they want to have a vast vocabulary. Let's say, imagine you have a person who has a vast vocabulary. He has all these words, but he has no grammar. He can't put these words together.
Yeah.
So I think it's more important. The grammar is more important, right? So getting really good at the grammar, and then now once you add new words, it's easy to put everything together. Whereas a lot of people, they might have all these submissions, for example. They know all the crazy, amazing submissions, but they don't have basics. They don't know how to escape them out. They can't escape the mount. So forget about going for a rear naked choke if you can't even get out of the mount. So I like to learn from the worst case scenario, or teach from the worst case scenario, so the student becomes very comfortable in these uncomfortable positions, being able to escape all the submission positions, being able to escape all the submissions. Like not a lot of people drill from a submission, starting from a submission. So that's such an important thing to do. And also, start from the armbar, for example, and then drill that to get out. And we're going 100%. Partner's trying to really go for the armbar, you're trying to escape. And you eventually, after doing this for weeks on end, you get better at certain escapes that you might not be good at before. And then also, experienced guys, they often, what happens is they get so good at, let's say, defending a certain submission. So let's say you've been training for a long time, you never get caught in triangles anymore. So now you go compete, or you go against a more experienced guy on the mat, and he catches you in a triangle, you will be completely blank because you don't have the muscle memory anymore. You lost it. You know the technique, but you get caught in a triangle. You haven't been caught in a triangle for years.
Yeah.
Because, and then now you get caught in it with another training partner that's more experienced than you, and you go blank. You don't know how to react. You don't know how to react because you haven't been caught in it for so long. So it's important to put yourself in these situations, to keep on refreshing your muscle memory. Of course, trying to tweak it and always refine it to become more efficient, and add new escapes and reactions. So I try to do that as much as I can with my students and put myself in these things. So maybe I have one escape that I'm really good at, but then any submission, any move can be defended, right? There's nothing 100%. There's always a defense and often a counter to a move.
Yeah.
So you go for an escape one, and your partner defends escape one, you have to go quickly to another escape.
Yeah.
And he might defend that, so you might have to go to another escape, whether it's the previous one or another one. So that's also really important. Those isolation drills, not just positional, but also submissions. And often what happens is a lot of people, they don't defend first. They right away try to escape. But because you're already caught in a submission, you're going to get submitted if you don't defend first. So you want to defend first, and then while you defend, you escape. So that's always the procedure usually. I remember I would come to train in the States when I'm driving the car and have all these ideas. Okay, I want to work on this, I want to work on that. And then I come to train, sparring, everything, driving home again. And I'm like, man, I forgot everything. I wanted to work on. I just did my A game again. This was like for years until I was like, okay, let me write it down. So I remember I wrote it down, and then I remembered to do it, So for me, it was like always three things, whether it's an escape, whether it's defense, offense, positional, submission, whatever I wanted to work on, new submission, whatever, like whatever you want to work on. And then what I did is there's three different training partners. There's a higher, more experienced, less experienced, and equal. So I would always, when we do the free sparring and we would change partners, anytime I'm paired up with a less experienced partner, I would try these things out, be more experimental, try certain whatever I want to work on. Work on my weaknesses, work on different tools, different guard passing, different sweeps, different takedowns, different game, not a game. Okay, trying to
Yeah.
develop new skills and get that in part of your get that to add that to your arsenal instead of just playing your A game. And I think that's the key to keep on evolving and keep on progressing, because I see too many guys, because obviously the ones that are sticking to this game are very competitive. So we are very competitive by nature. So it's very common to always play your A game, which in the short term you might be winning, quote unquote, but
Yeah.
in the long term it's hurting your game because you're not letting go. You're not opening up. You just don't want to give an inch. You don't want to give up a point. So in the end, you don't evolve. Then you get the other training partner that is playing around, getting tapped sometimes left and right against even lesser experienced guys because he's trying things out. He's not treating the sparring, the rolling as a competition.
Competition.
So I think that's really important for your development and your progress in jiu-jitsu, to stay, be experimental, treat the academy, the dojo, as a workshop. Imagine like a F1 race car. F1 race cars, most of the time, they're not racing. Most of the time, they're in the workshop, tuning up things left and right, tuning up spare part, changing parts, figuring out that turn that they weren't as efficient as, and try to fix that, try to become more effective on that turn, experimenting and like on the computer, trying, on the car, still not racing, but trying certain turns out, and to in the end, once they race, they become more effective, and efficient. So that's the whole point. So imagine when you go to the training, don't treat it as a competition. Don't think, okay, I'm going to compete now. I'm actually going to practice and get better. So how do you get better? It's not by playing your A game. It's trying to work on other new skills, so that's really important. And I mention this all the time to my students, and it's very difficult to do
Hmm.
because the nature is very competitive, so we don't want to get tapped, right? But sometimes
Yeah.
getting tapped is a good thing, because you learn what you're doing wrong, and then you can fix that. So imagine we're an F1 race car, and we're going to the workshop to try to tune up parts and change spare parts and all that stuff, instead of treating it as a competition. So when you play your A game, should be when you're competing or you're defending yourself in this, in the real world. That's where you should be playing your A game, but not at the dojo.
On.
That's yeah. And so that's how I
Yeah.
kind of develop and keep on evolving my game. I write things down. I try things out. Um, you don't want to try things out against somebody more experienced. Against somebody more experienced, you're going to work on your positioning
Defense.
and your defense. See how long you can last, how long you can survive. And it's often being defensive. Why? Because they're more experienced. Or positioning, trying to maintain a position. See how long you can maintain your guard before they pass, for example, not offense. So that's kind of how I always work. And then once with the lesser experienced guys, you work on new tools. Once you feel like those skill sets are getting better and better, you can work on somebody even more experienced, until you can work on somebody that's equal experienced than you. Let's say you never do the Dar stroke. So you're going to go from the lightest and smallest training partner and the least experienced training partner first, until you work on okay, that works against him, then work on another one, look on a little more experienced than him, until you feel like you can do it against somebody equally experienced. So I do that, for example, 3 techniques. Maybe have a certain guard pass, a certain reversal, and a submission or an escape, whatever. And with that training partner that's the least experienced, that's all I'm going to do. I'm not doing any of my A game. I'm just doing a different guard pass. I will not do my strong guard passes against that training partner. I would just do another guard pass, and it's trial and error. It's going to be frustrating because you'll
Yeah.
be doing because you will not be doing well against this training partner. Sometimes they even get the better of you because you're not playing your A game. But you have to stick to it. You can't let that your pride and your ego get in the way. If not, you're never going to evolve. And then once these things start clicking, and once the submission or the reversal or takedown or guard pass or transition starts clicking with that particular training partner that's the least experienced, then you can go to the next one that's a little bit more experienced than that particular training partner, until eventually you feel like, okay, this move is part of my arsenal now, it's part of my DNA. I can use it against somebody equal experienced. And it can take, sometimes it's after one time, sometimes it's after a few days or a week or a month. It depends. Sometimes after months, I've had like techniques that I've tried. After like 3 months, I'm like, man, this still doesn't feel right for me. It's not, I'm not going to throw it away. I'll put it in the archives right now, and then work on it again later, and then maybe work on something else. But that's kind of how I feel like for me, and that's how I teach my students to try to evolve and progress, is using that approach. Because if not, you'll realize quickly, time flies. After 5 years, the student will realize, man, I haven't evolved at all. I'm still doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's what a waste of time, right? Because you're not competing every day. That's just training. That's just, at the dojo, training with your training partners, trying to experiment and try things out, so putting yourself in bad situations, trying to escape different ways. For example, I put myself in arm, submissions, arm locks, triangles, and then try to escape a different way. And then you get caught and you try it again, But eventually, through trial and error, things start clicking. Okay, then now you might have developed finally another way to escape an armbar. So, because nothing's 100%. There's no escape or move that's 100%. Anything can be defended and often countered. So you got to have different tools. You got to have different escapes. For example, you can't just have one escape for the submission. You got to have more escapes. So if you go to escape number one and your partner defends that escape, you can go straight into escape number two. And, and then if he defends that, you might go to escape number three, or escape or back to 1-2-1, for example. But in order to be able to do that, you have to put yourself in these situations. Yeah, it doesn't happen just automatically just because you watched it on video. You got to practice this, like against somebody that's resisting. So you don't want to do it against somebody more experienced, obviously, or equal experienced. You got to do it against somebody less experienced, much less experienced. First, put yourself in these positions, and then work from there. Just be ready that you will not be doing so well against that person, and that's okay, because it's not a competition. It's the workshop.
Yeah. Professor, thank you very much for your time. It's an honor and pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and until the next time. By the way, when I say OSSM, awesome?
Awesome. Yeah, awesome.
That's awesome.
Awesome,
you know that, right?
I know that.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Some people ask me like, what do you mean by what's awesome? I'm like, then I write awesome, and then equals like the English way of writing awesome. I'm like, oh, awesome.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome.
I know that. Awesome, prof. Okay. Awesome.
Because I feel like us is, I think everybody says boring. So I added an M and said awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome.